topic is universal design and aesthetics, and why those two concepts are important to combine for a more accessible, inclusive world that promotes well-being. And to explore this, we have Dr. Gavin Jenkins, UAB professor and chair of the Department of Occupational Therapy in our School of Health Professions. We also have Rebecca Roberts. She is with UAB Facilities, and she is a project manager for all those new projects that come up. And Samantha Wadsworth is an ADA investigator and with the UAB Disability Support Services. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Rebecca and Samantha.
Hello, and thank you so much for having us. This is exciting, such an important topic. I'm going to just go over a little bit of kind of the background about universal design and some of those principles that are used with that. So, yeah, it's showing. Can you get it in slideshow mode? Becca, do you have it?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's in slideshow for me. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
Let me do it again. Can you see it? No, you can't see it, can you? Are you just seeing the regular share? I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. I apologize. I'm going to start the slideshow and then share. I think that's my problem. I shared and then did the slideshow. So, well, this worked in rehearsals, right? That should be it. Is that it?
Yay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. So I think it's important to kind of back up a little bit and just kind of talk about universal design and kind of where did this come from. And a lot of the groundwork for what we have now for more accessibility came from really beginning in the 60s and 70s with the disability social justice movement. So I have a couple of pictures on the screen, and the first one is a picture from Manhattan when there were buses. The bus lines were just not accessible, and so wheelchair users held up Fifth Avenue to kind of show, to kind of protest that, which kind of helped start some of the conversation with public transportation. There's a picture in the middle. It's different self-advocates, and they have a banner. They're doing a demonstration or a march, and it says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," by Martin Luther King Jr. And so those are both from the 60s, 70s. And then this last picture, which can be a very powerful image, is from what was called the Capitol Crawl, where individuals who were wheelchair users, or they may have used crutches, got out of their chairs, put down their crutches, and climbed up the stairs to the Capitol to demonstrate how this was a big barrier. There were so many things in our country that really stood for, freedom, and they didn't have access to these things. So that was the Capitol Crawl was in 1990, right before we got the Americans with Disabilities Act put into law. So that's just a little bit of the pictures. Sorry, I muted myself. All right, we move on to the next slide. So to kind of look at this background of where the social justice movement came, for a long time, and we still use it in some ways, but there's this medical model, where it focuses on the disability as a person-based issue, defining the disability and the diagnosis or the impairment has an effect on the individual. It's kind of a mindset of it's a problem that needs to be fixed. But this social model that was really coming into play, really starting in the 70s, focuses on the barriers created by the environments, the attitudes, and the systems as the issue. So I think another way of kind of looking at this on the next slide is looking at, accommodations or things that we create for a specific person or need. But when we put in universal design, we are it's useful for everyone and it's there. And there's obviously needs sometimes for specific accommodations for an individual, but a lot of times if we have things already there with equal access, it can eliminate some of the need for some of those accommodations and kind of that whole process, that exhausting process that some people have to go through just to get, equal access to buildings and websites and things like that. So Judy Heumann is a disability rights pioneer, and she had a huge hand in the social disability movement. And I love this quote from her. It says, "Disability only becomes a tragedy when society fails to provide the things we need to lead our lives. Job opportunities or barrier-free buildings. It is not a tragedy to me that I'm living in a wheelchair." So much, kind of removing those barriers can be so empowering. Okay. So you can kind of think about accessibility and then a universal design kind of going hand in hand. So with universal design, these are things that we're already putting into place, and they're things that are there to make more equal access, but they're also things that are built in so that we all can enjoy and use, right? So I am not deaf or hard of hearing, but I really enjoy using closed captioning when I'm trying to watch a movie or a show, and it can be helpful for other people that may not, have a disability, but maybe English is their second language, or different things like that. Ramps into buildings. When I had two small children, those sure were handy for me to use to push those strollers around. So having those things in place, it just creates equal access for everyone. And there's 7 principles of universal design. And back also during, the 70s, there was an architect. His name was Ronald Mace, and he had polio when he was 9 and was a wheelchair user. And so he really helped create kind of this concept of universal design and putting in accessibility within architecture. And so real quick, I'm going to go through these 7 and then I'll pass it over to Becca. But one of the principles is equitable use. So a design that's useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. An example here is electric doors that open. All right, and then number 2, flexibility and use. The design accommodates a wide range of individuals' preferences and abilities. And I used an example here of an adjustable chair, an office chair, a desk chair. All right, number 3, simple and intuitive use. So use of the design is easy to understand, regardless of the user's experience, knowledge, language skills, or current concentration level. So not only having the wording, but also having a visual with pictures that you can use. All right, and then 4th, perceptible information. So the design communicates necessary information effectively to the user, regardless of ambient conditions or the user's sensory ability. So here I have, example from a train. What do you call this? Train station. It is Monday. My brain is still turning on. You have a train station, and you see where you have the yellow area to kind of indicate stay behind this line, right? But there's also the texture there. So if it's somebody that wasn't able to see that, they could feel that. Okay, and number 5, tolerance of error use. This is probably my favorite thing ever for myself. And this is a design that minimizes hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. So one thing that I think about is now, where you have your key that you take with you and it automatically will lock your doors, that you can't accidentally lock your keys in your car. That is something I probably did more times than I would like to admit back in my 20s before I had that kind of access. But, also things like irons that automatically turn off, or, safety devices put on electrical tools and things like that. All right. And then low physical effort. I think this one is really important. So many times when people are making things compliant with the code, it's kind of something that's kind of tacked on the end. The ramp that's at the end, and it's got a really intense incline that can be hard to get in. It needs to be low physical effort. So here the design can be used efficiently and comfortably and with a minimum of fatigue. So we have here the a door handle that's a push lever as an example. All right, and then the last one, number 7, size and space for approach and use. So appropriate size and space is provided for approach, reach, manipulation, and use regardless of the user's body size, posture, or mobility. So having sinks at different sizes, paper towel holders, things like that can be usable. I know in our building we have a stool that can be pulled down for someone that's, that may not be able to reach all the way up. And then we also have where you can slide under. So again, universal design, that can be someone who may have be of small stature, but that also can be useful for children as well. So those are kind of very quick little overview about kind of a little bit of the background and just those 7 basic principles of universal design. And one of the things that is important, I was doing a presentation, I think it was Friday, to counselors. We talk all the time about being, as counselors, we're trying to create a welcoming environment, that everyone is welcome here. And, one of the things I was asking them is, what is your environment doing? Are there barriers that are put up unintentionally by, not access to your building or not equal access to your website or different things like that may make people not feel welcome? And it's those unintentional things. So just looking for ways, and it doesn't always have to be that you've got to go out and, redesign a building. There's things that you can do within your space that can just create more inclusivity, of more universal design. And I know Becca's going to go into some more details on that stuff. So.
Thank you, Sam. So I'm going to kind of go into, Sam touched on the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I'm just going to kind of go into a brief overview of what that is. So when we talk about it, you know what we're talking about. I love this quote and about accessibility. And it basically is just, kind of summing up the fact that we're, people who are asking for accessible design, we should all be asking for accessible design. We never know what tomorrow may bring. That, the true purpose of it is just to make sure that everyone is able to navigate all spaces without frustration, without unnecessary barriers. So the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. It is a federal law in 1990. We'll be having the it says 8832, but we'll be having the 34th anniversary coming up. It was based off of the Equal Rights Act. That's what they used in writing it. So it is a federal mandate. Sorry, this is left over from another one, universal design. So I think Sam has pretty much covered that one. So here at UAB and, at colleges and institutions across the country, we are all subject to what is now the 2010 ADA standard. So there was a version in 1990 when the law originally came out, and then they did an update in 2010. So that's what we base our designs off of here. So the standards covers everything that you could think of, from stairs, elevators, how high the light switches should be, the slope of ramps, the cross slope of ramps. It covers everything. And so here are just some visuals that are in the standards that can kind of help you understand what's required for accessible design. So this may be something that you don't think about if you aren't someone who is in a wheelchair. But But when you have a door that has a latch and a closer, the code actually states that you should have a certain clearance on the push side and on the pull side. If you think about when you're coming up, approaching a door in a wheelchair, you need that space so that you're able to open the door and have it open properly for you so that it's not running into your wheelchair. So this just kind of shows you how everything is laid out in these guidelines. It's everything from, the height of light fixtures, signs, water fountains. You need to have, high and low. So you have someone who's in a wheelchair, or you have someone with a bad back who's very tall. So want to make sure that everyone is covered. Again, those principles of universal design. Like I said, even the heights of things that are sticking out off the wall. Think about someone who has low vision or poor vision. They're using a cane. They are able to use the cane on the ground, but if something's sticking up and sticking out from the wall, they may run into it. It becomes a trip hazard for them. Here are some things that we talk about with different departments here at UAB, just certain things that as you're, going about your day, things that you could notice wherever you are at work or in your own home, but, looking at things that are mounted on the wall, making sure they're within an accessible reach range, making sure, if you mount a television to the wall, making sure it's not protruding more than 4 inches, like we were talking about for someone with low vision. Refrigerators and freezers, you can now easily search accessible refrigerators and freezers. If you're someone who does purchasing for wherever you are at work or even in your home, nowadays you can go on Lowe's or Home Depot, and there's literally a toggle on the side where, if you're picking the whatever brand or color, there you can also select accessible units. So all these things that you can bring into your world. Like I said, no one knows what the future holds, and so we really should all be promoting accessible design in all aspects of life. These are some of the things that we especially notice in restrooms. Paper towel dispensers, soap dispensers, and toilet paper dispensers are something that are easy to change, and a lot of times they can end up not being in the correct location. So that's something we want to look out for. So this is another image from the standards. It just kind of shows you when I say something should be in accessible reach range, this is what I'm talking about. So for someone, if someone was in a wheelchair, that would be 15 inches above the ground up to 48. So if you're even just installing a coat hook at your house, you may want to think about installing it within accessible reach range, so that if someone comes to your house, they would be able to use it without your help. Again, these are just some other examples of what's in the standard. Like I said, it calls out every situation you can imagine with different size obstructions. And again, same with the reach range, getting everything. So here at UAB, and like I said, any new construction project is going to be designed per the standards across the board. It is a federal law. It will be designed per the standards. However, sometimes when people move into a building, things can happen, and people put furniture and different things that might block some accessible features that the building had before people moved into it. So here are some things that we like to point out. Again, just for you to think about as you're navigating the world. And if you're able to make a difference, we always say, move it if you're able. If not, try and find out the person that can be responsible for moving an item, just to help make the world more accessible for everyone else that's navigating it. Sidewalks, as we all go down either city of Birmingham or wherever you may be, sometimes people can put up sandwich boards or, bikes or scooters, especially, can block sidewalks. So that's one of the things that, if you're walking down the street and you see something like that, if you're walking around UAB, you can go to the transportation website and you can, there's a micro-mobility reporter and you can report these sorts of items. Doors, we like to make sure, even in your office, maybe someone would be coming to visit you who might be in a chair, just making sure that you're keeping that push-pull clearance. Again, 18 inches on the pull side and 12 inches on the push side clear, so that, someone would have enough clear floor space to get in and out without needing anyone else's assistance. And then again, I don't know why everyone likes to put the trash can in front of the elevator button, but not the best location for it. So if that's in your office building, think about reaching out to your building administrator to get that moved. Again, making sure, bulletin boards, dry erase boards, literature racks, if you're someone that engages with these things in your daily life, trying to make sure that they're within that, at least 50% is within that reach range. And then making sure that restrooms and stairways, I know a lot of times we'll have a tiny restroom and then we come and put a giant trash can in the corner. But just trying to make sure there's, a 5-foot turning radius, clear space for someone to turn around if they were in a wheelchair and that's not blocking the doorway. Again, these are just more examples about, relocating trash cans, bikes, and scooters. Just encouraging everyone to report those if they see them. This is just a little bit of information about captioning. I'll go through it really quickly. Just like Samantha said, captioning can help everyone. It doesn't necessarily just help people with hearing impairment. We have something here at UAB called Kaltura, which will automatically do captioning. I don't know if y'all are at other universities or other places, but I encourage you to reach out to your disability support services or like organization where you are to see if they might have something like this. When you're making a bulletin or even sending an email, but especially posters and things like that, we just kind of want to encourage you to think about using a font that is accessible for everyone. That would be a sans serif font. You can see the little serifs are the little parts you can see on the word earth at the top. That little extra part can be hard for people with low vision to be able to see. I also want to make sure that the letters are all the same thickness. That's also helpful for people. So just, keep that in mind if you're making a presentation or, a flyer or, anything that you're sending out to a large group of people, just so that it makes it easier for everyone. Again, we just want to make sure that the level of frustration is removed and that, everyone's on an equal footing. Again, if you're making a presentation or something like that, making sure that you have high contrast. If you have colors that, if you want to have colors, if you're putting font with a background that are opposite on the color wheel, not next to each other on the color wheel. And then it's just always also a good idea if you are planning an event to make sure that you have some sort of disclaimer on the bottom saying that, if you are going to, if you need to request accessibility accommodations, here's the person to reach out to. So again, just kind of some things to think about as you're navigating the world, trying to make sure that everyone is included. And I just close with this one. I always like this quote. It's just a lack of awareness that results in things being inaccessible. And I think, thankfully y'all are here. You're obviously interested in accessibility. And now you have the awareness to go out into the world and make it a more accessible place for everyone around you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca and Sam. When I've heard you give this or parts of this presentation previously, it really is pretty eye-opening when you just start to look. If you don't currently have a disability or a mobility disability or any type, it's how many obstacles there are. And so, yes, thank you for what you do. And so now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Gavin Jenkins. He's going to talk with us a little bit about his personal experience in occupational therapy and add in a little bit about aesthetics.
Thank you, Kimberly. But before that, there was a question in the chat room. Do you want to respond to that before we move on, in case we lose it, or come back to that?
Thank you. Yes. So Marilyn says, we all understand the challenges and limitations of parking on college campuses. Can you comment on any suggestions for disability options for parking on campus?
It is always a challenge. Parking in general, as you said, is always a challenge. I know at UAB we have an ADA committee that will be meeting this afternoon, and we have people from transportation on there, and we have a lot of conversations about finding ways to create more accessibility regarding parking, and changing some of the processes to make sure that is in that we're not creating extra barriers when it comes to that. So I know for here at UAB we communicate with transportation. If you are needing accessible parking, you connect with them and we get that set up. We also have different maps that kind of show that, and we're in the process of actually looking at better mapping and looking at additional ways to kind of address that. And also with, because parking can be limited, looking at accessible public transportation as well. So, making sure that our buses are accessible. We actually have a program called Blaze Ride for students that may qualify for that would take you from one location to the next. So that doesn't really necessarily answer the question there, because I know that is always, a challenge. Transportation and parking are always a huge challenge when it comes to accessibility needs. So I don't know if Becca has anything to add to that. It's not really answering a question, but.
No, I was going to say, you touched on everything I was going to mention. Yeah, Blaze Ride. I mean, it's difficult because not every building actually has parking, period, here on campus. So, but if a building, does have parking, obviously it has accessible parking. But we do try and work with, I know DSS is wonderful with working with students and their schedules each semester to make sure that we address the needs of whoever is having that issue that semester.
Yeah, we're also in a unique situation, which some other colleges are too, where we're intertwined within a city. So some of our parking spaces are actually city spaces, and we don't have a lot of control over those. So that kind of creates an extra barrier within that. If it's an accessible parking spot that people are using that shouldn't be, some of those parking spots are city parking spots. So it just another layer of complication, but.
Thank you. Okay, Gavin.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. And I think, I probably come from a slightly different perspective, and so I'll just share my views and thoughts on this. And some of this is based on, I've been an occupational therapist for about 30 years now, and a huge amount of my work has been based around the environment And certainly when I started 30 years ago, our appreciation and understanding of a lot of these challenges were very different. And certainly things like universal design wasn't even part of the discussion. And so what I'm going to share with you are just some very little snippets and personal views, and there's a limit to how much you can cover in this kind of time. But perhaps I'm just going to raise more questions, or at least help you to understand why, to me, things like this are really important. And I do want to share a couple of pictures with you. And one of the challenges, I think, is, you get put into these environments to talk to people. And I do want to share a picture, which to me is the biggest criticism of UAB. And that's, I've got to be very careful over my colleagues here, but it's always been my favorite example of how poor design can come together. And I hope in sharing this, they don't change it, because I need it every year to show my students. So just to say that there. But the piece that I find fascinating about the world around us, and I think it is so important that we understand this, is that really people were not part of design decisions until probably the last 10, 15, 20 years. Architects were not trained to understand people, not trained to really have an appreciation of people. Architects had so many other things to do. How do you make sure the building stands? How do you make sure all these pieces come together? That people were a kind of secondary thought. And then worse still, people with limitations were an absolute the last thought of the day. I truly believe a lot of the challenges we face today in terms of accessible design is that it is still, okay, this is the building, this is going to what it's going to look like, how do we make sure it's compliant? It's kind of an afterthought. And that has to change. We have to change that mentality. And so to me, it's exciting to hear this talk about universal design and really putting people at the center of the way we build spaces and we build the environment around us. And it's not just the built environment, it's not just man-made environment. There's another piece of that called the natural environment. And we all want to interact with the natural environment more, because it has a direct impact on our health and wellness, which is really what this whole series is about, is how does this impact our wellness? Why is it important? It's important because our current life expectancy in the United States and kind of globally is about 75, 76, maybe 80 years if we're lucky. The data seems to tell us that if you take that lifetime, you're going to spend at least 13 years of those with some kind of impairment. That's just the natural aging process. That's what we're all going to experience. And so for all of us, there is something to be said in trying to create these spaces that actually will accommodate us better as we age through the natural aging process, and we experience disability because of the natural processes, even if, that's just the reality. And everything you experience on a day-to-day basis, everything you experience is a function of our placement in this physical world. As an OT, we're trained to really understand that the environment and the person influences what they want to do. We could talk for days on what OT is, but if you take those three little aspects, then those, me as a person, I'm really important in that relationship. What I want to do is important, and it exists in a physical space. And so that physical space has to accommodate what I want to do. And so when you add limitations, you add challenges, then the physical environment is a part of that disability. It's connected. There is a direct relationship between the person, the space they're in, and the level of disability that they experience. So it's just really important that we start to build buildings, we start to build spaces that actually supports us to do what we want to do, and supports us all, because disability is not a minority of our population. They're not just this group that sits, somewhere. They are us. We're on a continuum constantly between being abled and being disabled. And we move and we slide on that continuum all the time. And sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's permanent. And as I face my 60th time around the sun, I slowly begin to see myself struggle with things that I didn't necessarily struggle. And sometimes, the environment in which we're in really impacts us. So disability is going to impact us all. And so just be selfish and say, I want a world that accommodates me as I move around it, and and I think we think of disability as a minority, but I think the statistic I read the other day was this, we've got about 8 billion people on the planet with us, we're all sharing this planet Earth, and 1 billion of those have some form of disability. And so this is not a minority issue. This is all of us. And I think in the United States, we're talking 50, 54, 55 million people who are living with a disability. And that number is just going to accelerate as we get this old aging population. So we're all invested in this, and it's really important. And yet today, we still have people with disabilities who are having to plan just to do the everyday things of life that we take for granted. Having to ring up a restaurant and say, "Are you accessible?" Getting excited when they go into a public restroom and realize it's accessible to them. I mean, how many of us get every day and think, "Oh, this is really exciting. This restroom's fantastic. I need to go and tell everybody about it." Now, I did do that once in David in Sweden, but that's a landscape that we experience wellness. There's evidence out there that shows that if there are more trees on a street, there's less likely occurrences of road rage. There's evidence that if you see trees, you just have to, people heal better in hospitals if they can look out of a window and see a tree. The evidence actually says if there is a picture of a tree in their room, they'll heal better. Our connection with nature is just so important. So yes, let's get the built environment right. Let's make it universally accessible. Let's make sure we can all use it to its fullest. But let's also bring nature back into our spaces and just enjoy and experience the health and wellness that goes with it. I think I spoke for way too long, Kimberly. I'm sorry.
You were wonderful. Everyone was wonderful. I do have, I did want to say that the inspiration for today's program was a wonderful company called welcomed.co. And it was created by a wonderful woman, Christina Casanova. And she was unable to be with us today, but her company, welcomed.co, or the welcomed company, is all about creating aesthetically pleasing, beautiful products that are created with the universal design. Sometimes they're created like as actual like medical equipment and medical supplies. But her story, and it's on the website, but she had a loved one with a chronic illness, a chronic condition, and so she just wanted to investigate why can't adaptable products, universal products, medical equipment be beautiful so that people will want to use them, and people so I just wanted to acknowledge Christina and welcomed.co because you should check that out. It's a new company. But yes, Gavin, I wanted to mention that Cassie shared that you're a joy to listen to and she loves your perspective. And
Can I add a comment about, we've talked about the environment, but, we use tools within those environments, and so many of the products we use are very poorly designed. Designers are not normal people, and I mean that in the most respectful fashion. And I've had many a conversation with young designers who openly will say, well, I designed it for myself and I hope other people can use it. And so I think one of the things we can do as consumers is we can look to the products out there. We have power as consumers. We can look to the products that embrace these universal design principles, and through our buying power, we can improve the quality of products that are out there. The OXO kitchen range was highly touted as a universal design range of product, and they just make, I mean, they're good to look at. They're attractive and they work well in kitchens. So it's not just about spaces. It's also about the stuff within the spaces and the stuff we use within those spaces. And so I love the lady you've just spoken about, and the idea that you look at things and why shouldn't they be beautiful? Why should I tell my students, when I'm old and you come looking for me, do not bring me white products into my house. I like colors. I want colors. I want a grab bar that screams fluorescent orange. Don't try and give me a white one. We're all consumers. So sorry, again, you've got me going, Kimberly.
That's why you're here. But yeah, so and I did want to open it up. Rebecca or Sam, did y'all have any additional thoughts about that? Just the idea of beauty and design?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Gavin kind of already, hit on this, but so often, accessibility features are thought of as, tacking it on at the end. And I'm married to an architect, and I'm glad to say that he actually is very deliberate in his design to ensure that that's not the case. If it's a restaurant with a bar, you can design within the bar, a dip that kind of shows where it's going to be accessible seating instead of it being tacked on next to the kitchen or things like that. And so many times it's the mindset of compliance instead of equitability. So if we're looking at it through that lens of I'm designing this, for everyone to enjoy, and just like, again, incorporating greenery and natural light and things like that, but also it's if we're intentional, we can design things that are beautiful and are usable and make it easier for everybody. So I love that. I heard an analogy in a training a while back, and a lot of the universal design I talk about is within learning, but I think it's relevant across the board, where they were talking about if you ever watch a professional bowler, they don't bowl down the middle. They're not focused on the majority in the middle. They curve, because if they bowl down the middle, then they're going to get that split, right? They're going to leave those pins standing there. But if you're focused on those harder to get pins and you're curving and you're focused on them, you're going to get everyone. And I think that's a really good analogy for universal design. If you're thinking about, the more, the things that are causing more barriers, and we can remove some of those, it's going to be helpful for everybody. So I wish I could claim that was my analogy. I heard it in training, and I just thought it was a great one.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. I also have to apologize. We were set up for our closed caption. Our tech person, wonderful Dana, she had run it and it was working. And so very sorry that was not running today. However, we will make sure the video recording is closed captioned, and we'll share that with everybody. So again, I apologize for that technical error that we had. But again, thank you so much to Dr. Gavin Jenkins and Sam and Rebecca, who had to go to a next meeting. But yes, thank you so much. It's so important to bring bring all people to a table and hear what people need and when you're designing. And yeah, thank you all so much.